So I'll just do a little bit of a presentation before I ask Pam to come up, just so that you know how we started this review. So in November, ANZSL consultants were engaged to undertake a full review of the city's care and disability services. The objective of the independent review was to present a factual overview of those services, whilst also investigating the changes in the industry in Australia. To also report on how the care services industry funding arrangements and the changing preference of consumers will affect the city to deliver those services into the future. And the focus has always been on ensuring that our community will continue to receive the best possible services over the coming decades. Went too fast. So at a council meeting on the 26th of April, the council endorsed the city to engage with the community in regards to the findings of this review, hence that's why we're here today. And it is really important to note that there is no decision that's been made at this time. The council will be involved in all the engagement activities to gain as much information as possible so that they can make an informed decision. The community briefings, we had a staff and volunteer briefing on Monday. On Wednesday we had our first community briefing at 10 AM here in this room, and this is maybe the last briefing that we'll have unless there's a demand to have another one in the near future. Feedback will be received up until 4 PM on the 17th of June, and at the end of Cam's presentation I'll go through with you how you can actually give us some feedback. And we're hoping to report to a special council meeting in July 2016, the report will include all the community feedback and recommendations. There's our commitment. Client care and wellbeing is the city's primary concern. The city will continue to ensure the best possible care for all our clients and residents. So questions, there'll be an opportunity for you all to ask questions at the end of Cam's presentation. And when asking questions, please wait for the microphone. We'll have a couple of roving microphones. If you please state your name and where you're from, that would be fantastic. And we are videoing the briefing. Before I hand over to Cam, I'd love to introduce you to the project team that are working on the review of the care services and disability services for the city. So I'm the project sponsor. We have a human resource project specialist, Diana, where's she gone? There she is at the back there in the lovely red coat. We have a human resource business partner, Justine Luckens, who actually works for the city right across the Community Development Directorate. She's unable to be with us today. Our lovely Lisa Bradley is our Manager of Marketing and Comms, so she's doing all the communication plans around this project. And Diana Sinet is our Project Administrator, who's also unable to make it today. So, here we go. I'd love to hand over to Cam ANZSL from ANZSL Strategic to present his... There it is. Robert. Give him a warm welcome.
Thanks very much, Tanya, and thank you everyone for your time today and the opportunity to talk to you. And some positive words around Collingwood. I'm not sure playing Geelong is going to work very well for us, but good to hear something positive. Today is the last of the community consultations, as Tanya said earlier, and I'll have an opportunity to give you a little bit of an overview of what it was that we've been doing over the last few months, a quick overview of what's happening in the aged care, retirement living and disability industry, to put what we've done into a little bit of context. To talk to you about our findings and our observations around the services that are provided for older people and disabled people in the city. And finally, to talk about some proposed options. As Tanya said, there's time at the end for you to ask questions, and Tanya and I will be available then and immediately after if you have any questions, if you'd rather not ask the questions with everyone here. Just very quickly first, my firm is a firm that focuses just on aged care, retirement living services. We work across Australia and to a lesser extent Southeast Asia and New Zealand. We are nurses and accountants, which is a little bit like herding cats sometimes, but it's a combination of skills that's used primarily to help people deliver aged care services better, and also to help people build retirement villages and nursing homes. So that's our background, and that's why we were selected to help with this review. The review itself, as Tanya said, it had three sort of core requirements. The first was to do an overview of the services that are provided in disability, aged care and retirement living for Canning, to do a bit of an evaluation of those services as they're operating today, but also to look at how the world is changing in the future, in the industry, in the way that the government funds, in our expectations about the sorts of services that we need, and to talk about different options that might be able to help make sure that Canning can provide those services as best as possible in the future. And the priority that was given from the very outset of the project was to make sure not only that the services can be sustained as best as possible, but they can be improved in the new world. And that new world is exciting and a little bit daunting. This is a graph that's in your handouts. It talks about the ageing of Australia's population. It's looking at the number of people over 65 and the number of people over 85 in Australia now and into the future. And as you can see, that number increases very much over time. In fact, this change is the biggest change in an ageing population in Australia's history. We'll have more older people than we ever have in the past, and proportionately there'll be less taxpayers, less younger people available to help them. And so the government has been working on finding ways to make it more affordable, but also to try and make the services more responsive to the sorts of care that we're going to need as we're getting older. It has resulted as well in a change in ownership in the sector. Again, one of the slides that you have in your handout there talks about who's responsible for providing care and disability services. And you can see there in Australia, and Australia's a bit different from most developing countries. We have a very strong representation of the not-for-profit sector, of religious and charitable organisations are responsible for providing the majority of aged care, retirement living services, aged care services in particular in Australia. They are generally large groups that may have originated from church type groups, and they are created to specifically focus on aged care services. In the past, local government and state government had a bigger role in providing aged care services, and that's been reduced. There are a lot of private sector operators, for-profit operators, becoming more and more interested in the aged care sector. With a doubling of demand over the coming decades, they see this as an opportunity to be involved in a growth market. And so we're seeing more interest and investment, and hopefully coming with that is more innovation and better services as we move forward. The government had responded, and the bigger changes took place in 2012. They introduced legislation called Living Longer, Living Better, and they were a series of measures to do a few things. One was to try and make us better prepared for this large number of older people that would require support over the coming decades. And in part of that, they needed to look at ways of shifting responsibility from funding, from the taxpayer base, to us as consumers as we start to use those services. And so over time we've seen an increase in the initiatives introduced under Living Longer, Living Better, and that has seen a big change in the way the industry is operating. As I said, a lot more people interested in investing in aged care and hoping to get access to be able to have us as clients as we get older. The disability sector as well. Disability sector's probably always been a little bit more directed towards the specific needs of disabled people. and that's going through a big change as well, with the National Disability Insurance Commission making changes on the way that the services are provided and how they're paid for. They're trying to make them more responsive to the needs of individual disabled people. So, as an overview, aged care, disability and retirement living industry are becoming more focused on individual consumers, giving more responsibility for consumers, not only for paying for it, but also having a say in the sorts of services that they want to receive. This big market and less regulation is resulting in much more competition, much more organisations that are wanting to grow in this space, but also a whole bunch of organisations, particularly in home care services, that want to get into it for the first time. And with changing on the regulation and allowing more people to come into the market, we're going to see a lot more organisations competing to get our services. And the largest and the first of the changes will take place in February next year. So there's a lot of movement and a lot of changes already taking place with nursing homes, with residential aged care. A lot of the home care changes will start to take place next year, and for HAC in 2018. So, a rapidly changing environment, an environment that does need to change a lot to meet the challenges for Australia in the future. If we then use that as a context to have a look at the services that Canning is providing at the moment, there is residential aged care services or nursing home services, which is provided at Canning Lodge, which is a 42-bed facility. There is aged persons accommodations, retirement villages, 2 small retirement villages with a total of about 54 units across those 2 sites. There's quite a large home and community care service. There's over 1,500 people that receive services through the home and community care, the HAC services provided by the city. And then there are day centres as well, providing support for older people and their carers. There is Commonwealth-funded home care packages. These are the more intensive services that are provided with high-level care needs. They're funded primarily by the Commonwealth Government, and they're the ones I mentioned that are going to be subject to the first wave of change in home care from February next year. And then disability services. The city provides accommodation services primarily at 6 different sites across the region. Our findings in relation to each of those services first start with Canning Lodge. Canning Lodge is a lovely facility that provides in a clustered environment in separate houses services for people requiring residential aged care services, nursing home services. We found very positive feedback coming from people that have received the services, the people that are working in the services. The community consultation has sort of reinforced the very strong community views about the service that has been provided there. The facility was originally built 25 years ago for people with lower levels of care needs. It used to be that we would have hostels for people with lower level of care needs and nursing homes for people with higher levels of care needs. 3 decades later, most people that go into residential aged care have high care needs. Canning Lodge was built for low care needs, and while it's a lovely home and it's a really nice layout, it's not intended or wasn't originally intended to meet people with high care needs. At the moment, because we've got better at providing services at people's homes, most of the demand, what most people look for when they go to residential aged care, is in high care. And so there are aspects of Canning Lodge that don't meet a lot of the expectations of people going into the future. Still providing an important service now, but we'll need to look at the renovation and redevelopment of that service in the future. And that will be quite a substantial exercise over the short to medium term. So one of the challenges moving forward is to find the program and the investment required to be able to make that home more modern to the needs of the people that will need it in the future. The second one was around the retirement villages. Again, the retirement villages have been around for many decades. At the time they were built for a different demand base. They are relatively small themselves. The scale of the villages is small. There is potential in the future to be able to potentially increase the number of units that are on those villages. They are quite hard to fill because they're not modern. They don't meet the expectations of current or future generations of consumers, and so work will need to be done on those villages to make them viable and also to meet the needs of people in the future. The HAC services and the home care packages, probably the largest program provided by the city. Again, very well received by the people that receive those services, and our review showed positive feedback by management staff and the families that are engaged and benefit from this service. It's a reinforcement of how important it is that home care services and maintenance services are improved and developed further in Canning, and just how important it is for the consumers. These services are based on the current and historic funding systems, which are block funding, block grant funding. As we move into the new age, the way that these services are delivered will be more at the consumer level, and that will mean that the City of Canning, to continue to provide these services on a viable basis, will need to look at restructuring the way it delivers its services, and that will mean its information systems, its management structures will need to be changed to get ready for this new world of customer expectations, but also the changes to the funding model. Disability services, again, high client satisfaction. Accommodation is particularly important for the disabled because in the different funding models that are being put forward by the state and federal government, there's not a great deal of clarity about how accommodation services will be provided. And so the city provides a very important services for disabled people, and it's going to be very critical that the sorts of accommodation type services are continued in the future. There will be an expectation that more than just accommodation services are provided, and most of the reforms that will take place in the disability sector will be trying to provide a holistic service so that a disabled person will receive a myriad of different services to make their lives the full potential that it can be. So having evaluated the services that the city has provided, having a look at the strengths and weaknesses of each of those services, and in the context of a changing environment, we've provided the councillors with three core options, three different ways of approaching it. Again, these options are put forward with the idea of making sure that the services can remain and improve, not only because we have more people coming through the system, but because we're becoming more demanding in the sorts of services that we're looking for. There were three main options on how services might be delivered in the future. None of the options suggest that things can continue as they are. There will be a need to adapt. So the first option is around improving and enhancing the services that Canning provides internally, and that would mean reviewing and restructuring the systems and the processes for delivering care services into the future. The second is around looking at focusing primarily on the home care services and to look to get another organisation to run the nursing home and the retirement villages. And the third one is around looking to rejuvenate, improve and expand the services in partnership with another organisation that specialises in the provision of care for the elderly. I'll just take you through each of those three options and talk about how they might impact on the community. So the first one is around looking at internal processes, looking at how they can be changed within the canning, within the city to make them more efficient. There will be a need to be more competitive and to deliver the services at lower cost, at greater efficiency for consumers in the future. As I mentioned at the beginning, there'll be a lot of competition for services in the future. There will be a lot of different organisations that exist today and will exist in the future that will be trying to get as much business as they possibly can. And because consumers will more and more have the option of going with the provider of their choice, canning needs to be really competitive to make sure that it can keep and then expand its market into the future. That requires a lot of investment in resources and systems to make sure that the city can be competitive and actually deliver in accordance with the grant guidelines. It's not in a position to do that at the moment, and because these changes take place progressively, particularly from February next year, we need to move relatively quickly if this is the option that's preferred. It also requires that the city will need to find the resources for the eventual renovation, redevelopment of the retirement villages and the nursing homes, and that will require substantial investment of tens of millions of dollars. And these are things that need to be started to be planned now. There may be some disruption as the city, if the city went to go about re-coordinating and restructuring its services. And the hope would be that at the conclusion of that, the services would be competitive, the home care services would be competitive, and the retirement village and the nursing home would meet modern standards and still meet the needs of the community into the future. Am I not pressing it hard enough? Thank you. So option 2 is to look at finding another organisation to deal with the most expensive changes about modernising the nursing home and the retirement villages, and to look to have that organisation work on that side and for the city to work on improving the home care services. So what this option would do is it would take out the most capital intensive component of it, and probably the area where there's the most demand and the most interest in residential aged care and retirement living, and allow the city to continue its largest service, which is around its HAC and disability program. How this may impact the community, selling the assets to fund the infrastructure means that it's potentially more affordable for the city. Because there's a lot of demand for aged care and retirement living services, there'd be a lot of organisations that would be interested in acquiring it, and then that money could be used to reinvest in the home care services. But it would mean that the city wouldn't own those assets anymore. Someone else would be responsible for operating and running them. There also would be still be some potential disruption in services, because most of the resources would still go into the home care services and disability, and there could be some disruption in that. At the end, it could put the city in a position where it could improve its home care services and expand them into the future, and that would be the outcome that would be sought under option 2. And the final option is to look at improving and expanding the services in partnership with another organisation. And so that would involve having one of the larger organisations, most likely a charitable organisation, work with the city to help operate the services based on their experience and expertise. A lot of these organisations, as I mentioned at the beginning, were created to provide aged care, retirement and disability services, and it would be working with them to transfer aspects of the operations across to them, for the city to retain some assets and continue to control them, but to really work with another larger organisation that's specifically created to deliver these services. The positives are that it does create an opportunity for the city to remain active and involved in delivery of the services. without putting as much burden on ratepayers. And it does create the potential to work with an organisation that's more specialised in providing these services. Again, you run the risk of having some transition issues because a lot of their management systems and processes would be introduced, and there would be potential disruption for the services, and it would result in aspects of control being taken away from the city. The overall objective at the end of it is to improve and enhance the services with an organisation that was created just to focus on these areas. So they were the three options that were put forward. In summary, they are essentially the city going it alone and continuing to change and transition its services and try and remain competitive in the future. The second one is around doing that, but having another organisation run the nursing home and the retirement villages. And the third one is to partner with another organisation, and that other organisation would be responsible for the management of most of the services that are provided by the city at the moment. So that concludes the options, and you can...
Thanks, Cam. So before we go before I go through just where to from now, we've just got a couple of slides. We're opening up the floor to you, and we would love to hear any feedback that you would like to give us. So please raise your hand, and when we give you the microphone, if you could state your name and address, that would be fantastic. Okay, who's first? Up the back there? Thanks, Dion.
Hi, thanks, Cam. Thank you. Hi, my name's Tor. I'm the Greens candidate for Tagny. Thank you for the presentation, Cam. I had one concern. I think we share the same concern. You mentioned that there was little transparency, or there was little way to understand what federal funding for aged care would look like, and that was perhaps one of the drivers for this study around what is, Canning Lodge, which is a successful facility. Perhaps could you just let me know what the federal government could do to improve its planning or its transparency or its commitment to citizens in aged care? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a dangerous person to ask because we do a lot of advocacy work. I mean, one thing that would have been good is not taking $2 billion out of the funding for residential aged care last week. That would have been really, really helpful. For those of you who don't know, the Commonwealth announced changes in its budget to save money, and against all the things that we just talked about, an ageing population and all the challenges associated with making sure we deliver the best possible care, they pulled $2 billion out of the budget. So that would have been a good start, something that we'd love to get your support on. I think, having said that, I think some of the changes that have been put forward are positive in reducing the level of regulation in residential aged care. I think Canning Lodge has been a great success story. It's nearly always full, and it's a beautiful home. It's got a really warm, friendly environment, and the staff are multi-skilled, and you can see that their compassion for the residents. Part of the problem that we do have, as I mentioned before, is for the next generation of people wanting to use those services, they need a different physical form than Canning Lodge. I think making sure that we have as much flexibility to help develop and redevelop homes like Canning Lodge would be a great assistance from federal, local and state government. Get off my soapbox.
It's very good. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Robin, and I'm here with my mum Joan, who lives in Rossmoyne Retirement Village. As you can understand, with lots of elderly people living there, there's ripples of fear running through the village. I'd like to know how the fears are going to be managed for these people who often have difficulty speaking up for themselves. I guess what they're looking for is reassurance that things will either be the same or that they're going to be managed so that they have a better environment. So if somebody can explain how that would happen and how they will be engaged in this process, I think that would be really helpful.
I might just address a part of that component is people within retirement villages that have paid an entry contribution are protected by the Retirement Villages Act in Western Australia, which guarantees elements of tenure so that the villages that they have a right to live in their units. And so what would ordinarily happen in a renovation or redevelopment process is that the residents would be offered similar or better accommodation while the villages are redeveloped, if that's what the operator decides to do. The two villages have good elements, but they are getting dated. It's getting difficult to find people interested in moving into the villages. And so the need at some stage for all of these sorts of accommodations to be upgraded and improved is important. But the people that are in the villages at the moment are protected under state law.
Thank you. Thanks. More questions, Mr. Gleeson?
Good morning, everybody. My name's Bill Gleeson. I live at 107 Virginian Avenue, Riverton. This is a very complex problem the city has. And I'd like to ask one question first and get an answer. Are metropolitan city councils, town and city councils, moving into or out of retirement villages and aged person care?
Generally around Australia, and particularly in Western Australia, most of the metropolitan municipalities have moved out of operating or owning aged care and retirement living.
So the problem is why they're moving out of it is the cost of running these facilities. I can give you an example because I've been involved in it. The city of South Perth, Como retirement villages, they're having a hard time renting out the original first group of retirement villages. They just can't rent them out because one, they're like dog boxes. They were very early built over 25 years ago, and people's standard has changed. People today want at least 2 to 3 bedrooms, en-suites, all the flash things that we never had as kids. They want them now. The modern person wants them even in their retirement villages. And the way to do this is going to cost millions and millions of dollars. So there's the big problem with the city of Canning. But there's two parts of this story. There's the home care side of this, what goes on in the district. The city provides the facilities of gardening and lawn mowing and internal house cleaning. To me, I don't see that as a big problem. I think the city could just sit back and sit there for some years because I don't think that's going to bother the city. But I think the retirement village and home care is going to be the biggest change the city will have in the next 50 years.
Thanks, Mr. Gleeson. Any more questions, comments? Lady up the back there.
Hi, I'm Maz Cold. I live in Parkwood. It concerns me the fact that there are plans to deregulate the industry. With deregulation comes a lesser degree of transparency and accountability. And with that, who is going to audit the money flow to the end user? And what sort of watchdog situation or complaints process will there be for people to challenge their package? And also, with deregulation too, who is going to be the final person to make the decision when disability, chronic health care and age overlap? Because I can see a situation where each sector wants to pass the ball over to someone else.
Yeah, I think as an observation, historically, we see a lot of that, particularly between state and federal government and people at the higher level of acuity. We still do have a lot of people in hospital, not necessarily because they're sick, but because they're old and because it's hard to find accommodation in suitable nursing homes. On the disability side of things and the checks and balances, it depends on the services that are provided, and it's a complicated, but if I could oversimplify it just in my own head, on the one side there's much more focus on individuals having individual budgets and being able to ask the provider to allocate the services in the different areas based on the package, as you describe it, that they have. That process is audited by the funders, and then for most large aged care providers, they're subject to external audits as well from accounting firms to make sure that the money's being used as best as they can tell that the money's being used as well as possible. But I also agree with you that there is, with deregulation, and it's not coming, it's already here, so it's happening progressively, and we're kind of in the middle of it at the moment. There are some risks that the deregulation means that the dotting of the I's, the crossing of the T's, and the control over the money can sometimes be lost. And I guess that the government's hope, and I'm not speaking for the government, but the government's hope will be, because there'll be lots of different people competing for our business in the future, that we'll have the option through a less regulated process to change providers if we don't believe that what we're getting is the best it can be.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Helen, and Helen Benson, and I live in Willetton. And yes, I'm a bit worried about the option 2, which was privatization of the services, because then City of Canning would have no responsibility whatsoever in what's happening. And the option 3 as well, being in a partnership, this is not quite a good idea because they would throw the ball one to one another. And for me, I think the best option would be for City of Canning to trying to find a way, because if it's within City of Canning, it's like a big family. It's keep it small and keep it within. Whether we start delegating to other people, nobody would be responsible, and with the privatization of those companies trying to compete against each other, the service would go right down in quality in all the services. Okay, that's my point. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steph Jackson from the Willetton Progress Association. As we've been talking to people in our area, a lot of people have raised that they think we need more services in Willetton, and particularly villages in Willetton. We're a very large suburb, and we have a lot of people who are interested in staying in our suburb as they get older. So my question is, out of the 3 options, which do you think is going to have the biggest potential for allowing for more services in the different areas around the city?
I do understand the comments that were made before in terms of the risks associated with working with an unknown group. That is a risk, but in the likelihood of another larger group with specialist skills in developing retirement living and aged care services, it's more likely that you'd have a partnership that created more opportunities for more old people under the 3rd option of partnering with a professional provider.
Another question over the side.
Hi, my name's Blair Campbell. I live in Park Hill Way, Wilson. This is a matter that affects a huge number of people in our community, not just the enormous number of clients that access these services, whether it be in the aged care or home care or disability sector, but also their families and the people that care about them. There's also hundreds of employees and volunteers that are also affected by these changes. And I think what most people want to see is some certainty. So I guess I have two questions. One, has Ansell made a recommendation of which of the options that it's putting forward, or do you have a preliminary view of which option the city could pursue? And how can the city make an informed decision on these things without the certainty of knowing what funding models will be in the future with the changes that are upcoming and the opportunities of whether or not there are organisations out there to partner with and the sort of costs that those sorts of models will result in? Thank you.
So on the first question, the options are being considered by the council at the moment. The decision that the council will make will weigh up a series of different things. Part of them will be around the enormity of the reforms that you described, but most of it, as I understand, will be weighted towards the best interests of people within Canning. And so our work will be finalised when the council's had an opportunity to ask more questions about the options, and so there's been no final decision made yet. The second one around certainty on the reforms and the funding streams, some of the detail around that is not certain, but we do have a lot of information broadly about how we expect it to roll out. It's the first time it's happened in Australia that we move towards these less regulated models, but we do have international precedents that we can help get an understanding of what normally happens in this environment. So I would disagree that there's the level of certainty that you mentioned then. The council has also asked for high-level costings around the financial impact of the different options, and I expect that as they get more narrow towards a decision, they'll want more specific information on the financial consequences of the different approach. But their priority has always been, thus far, the highest priority has been around making sure the most possible services and the best possible services are available for the aged in Canning.
Thank you, Cam. Any more questions or comments?
Sorry, Eileen Whitehead, Queen's Park. Just a quick question. The budget was on May the 3rd, but the council met in April to discuss this and get your consult. So was there any prior knowledge of the budget?
No. I mean, most of what we heard in the industry of what was likely to change in the funding was numbers around $500 million, gently introduced around the indexation of subsidies in forward estimates, which is over 4 years. Not only did the government cut by $1.8 billion, but their calculation of the funding instrument was wrong, so that their actual cuts, according to our nurses, was $350 million too much, and we had no knowledge that they were going to cut that hard or that they were going to get their numbers wrong. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping it becomes more of an election issue. To be perfectly frank with you, I mean, in some ways it has been hard to make aged care more of an important subject because most of us are in denial about our own ageing. It's hard to encourage people to take a greater focus of it. But because we're all ageing now and there's so many of us going through the system, I'm hoping that the politicians see that this is just such an important aspect, and we need to make sure that we get the funding right and the balance between what we have to pay ourselves and what we need taxpayer support with.
Any more questions or comments from anyone?
I just want a quick one.
Hang on, Mr. Gleeson, I'll just go over here first.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth, and my husband Nick receives your home care packages. I have cancer, and he has a lung disease. So the package is set up so that if I die, he's still got help at home. Now, we're backwards, okay? We're not self-funded retirees. We live fortnight to fortnight. So all I see in a lot of this is dollar signs, and that is freaking me out. So can you answer me a question? How much is the cost going to be, or do you not have any idea?
Yeah, no, I'm
I
sorry.
hope I'm not the only battler in this room, surely. But I know that people want to know, you know, because if it goes up anymore, I have to cancel it for the simple reason that we cannot afford it.
Yeah, just a couple of things to clarify. And so these are not my programs. I don't represent the government. I'm just here to tell you what the changes are taking place. The only element that I can present on has been the position of the council, which has never been about the dollar signs. It's been completely about making sure that people like yourselves and your husband have access to the best possible care that they can get in Canning.
Well, he only gets 2.5 hours on a Wednesday, but it seems to be costing us quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
When I look at your statements, there's a lot of administration fees, and we're getting charged something like $21 a day, I think it is, and he only gets 2.5 hours on a Wednesday. So how can that be correct? And that's a City of Canning problem, that's not government.
Yeah. As I said, I'm not here to reflect on the government's policy on that. All I can tell you is that this process that we've been involved with has been to make sure that people in Canning get the best access to the services in the most efficient way.
So really, we still have to wait to find out all these things?
No, so the funding programs are relatively certain, so we do know the way that the funding will roll out in the future, and Canning has no say in that. It's a question of whether or not Canning is responsible for delivering those services for you and your husband, or whether or not they do so in partnership with another group.
So really, I'm still not getting a dollar answer, am I? It could go up, so I'll have to be in a predicament where I just said we'll have to cancel it.
Yeah, look, just broadly speaking, it doesn't make a big difference as to from the city's perspective. Generally, the government will subsidise and support people if they don't have the money to be able to do it themselves. Part of the focus of the changes that we've talked about today is to find out if people have the money themselves, if they have income or assets themselves. More and more of us will be required to use those assets to pay for care, so that the financially disadvantaged have the access to the limited taxpayer funds. That's part of the way that the program is intended to roll out. So this discussion is about, is the city in the best position to make that as efficient as possible and as appropriate as possible for the needs of your husband and yourself? Or are you better working with another organisation that specialises in those services to make it better and efficient?
Okay, so there really isn't an answer yet, is there?
Possibly not, but what we might do is take your questions offline, and we'll put you in touch with our Manager of Care Services, Alan O'Toole, who may be able to help you with that question. Thank you. Maybe over here.
I don't think you're going to be able to answer my question, but I want to raise it. And it actually comes on the back of this lady here. My name's Helen Bauer. I actually live in Thornley, but this particular debate really interests me. You talked before about people being in hospital waiting for residential care. Sometimes people are in hospital waiting for services in their home, but they aren't enough. There's not enough hours. They can't afford them, and you can talk to your provider and you can talk to Centrelink and get an application to reduce fees. But these particular services now, say a hair care package, at one time used to be about 20 hours, 19 hours, but now we're looking at 8, 9 and 10 hours, which when people have complex needs aren't enough. So that really concerns me, because not everybody has got lots of money or assets to sell, but these people are still in need. And I'm not quite in need of it yet, but I actually have to wonder, for my parents and also for myself, what's it going to be? And it's all right, now I didn't know about the $2 million or $2 billion that the government's taken out. This is an ageing population, and yet here they're taking money out. And then they say, on one hand, the hospitals are being filled with people that can't move out. I don't see quite the logic of one or part of the organisation of the government talking to the other and actually trying to balance these things. I understand you're not going to probably answer my questions, but I'm raising it because, like yourself, there's a lot of people struggling out there.
So I won't answer the question, but I'll just agree with you and just give you the example. So one of them that you mentioned around people staying in hospitals, either waiting for transitional care or waiting for care in a nursing home. One of the
And waiting for care packages that aren't
and waiting for very high-end care packages that would allow them to go back to their homes but feel safe and cared for. And one of the challenges that we have is the state funding of the acute sector and the federal funding of the aged care sector. Quite often you'll have people in hospitals which cost the taxpayer probably $1,100 a day, $1,000 a day, compared to being in a nursing home bed at $250. Is part of where the government, different layers of government don't talk to each other. I also find it frustrating. The vast majority of us would rather stay in our homes than go into a nursing home, and that's becoming even stronger within us. So being able to find a system that delivers services efficiently, so that we spend less time on administration and more actual contact hours, so that we can fulfil our wish that we all want to stay at home as long as humanly possible. I believe we're going to get better at those services, and I think part of the environment that we'll move into in the coming decades is going to make providers compete with each other to give you that maximum possible time. But in the meantime, it's expensive to deliver those services. We're living much longer, and the things that used to be much more impacting on our lives, we're living at home with them very much more, so it's very complex to deliver a lot of the care services. But I think we'll get better at doing those services, particularly if different levels of government talk to each other.
I've got one more question. I've got quite a loud for you. The other thing that came to my attention the other day was that you talked about hack changes in 2018. I was talking to a hack provider, and she was saying that their tenure is actually going to change. And she was saying that hack is not going to be viable any longer. So there's going to be no hack. There's going to be, I know we already go through the RAS system. Does that mean it's only going to be care packages of like one, which is very similar to hack anyway? So therefore the hack, which is cheaper than a care package, is going to be obsolete. Is that what you meant by changes in 2018?
Yeah, so they'll amalgamate the home care program, the Commonwealth Home Care Program, and the HACC program commencing from 2018, and that will continue progressively. But it doesn't mean there won't be HACC type services in the future. They'll just all be bundled together. Again, instead of having a state-funded program to deliver care at home and a Commonwealth-funded program to do exactly the same thing, they'll be amalgamated and hopefully find efficiencies within there, so that those maintenance services and those lower level or lower intensity HACC programs can continue to be viable.
Sorry, can I just add something on the back of that? Does that then mean that we'll be able to utilise say services that would traditionally have been HACC as well as high care packages? So like chain nursing services with high care packages, because we can't at the moment.
Yeah, so there'll be more of an assessment of us as individuals to determine what our level of needs are, whether or not we need domestic support, whether or not we need assistance with activities of daily living, or whether or not we need clinical support, more medical type support, and then the packages will be aligned based on that level of need. But then also they'll be looking at us as individuals and sort of saying, I know that Mary has no financial means, Tanya might have financial means, and so what they will do is that if Tanya has the means to pay for more of it herself, she will be asked to pay for more of it so that less taxpayer available dollars can help Mary out. So that's the other balancing act that they'll try and do in that system, and it's started already. So that means testing has started.
Yeah, I understand that side of it. I think it's more the double dipping with state and Commonwealth funding. Yeah.
Well, that'd be part of it, is try and get that double dipping and that inefficiency out of the system. Whether or not it's going to be successful, I don't know.
So thank you everyone. A big round of applause for Cam. if you have any further questions, there's lots of staff here. Cam will possibly be here for about 5 minutes or so if you'd like to ask. But I'll just finish off with just a couple of slides to let you know where to from here. Okay, so all this information from the community forum on Wednesday and the one today will be available. There's a copy of the presentation at the back on the table there if you'd like to take one away. A video of the forum will be on the city's website, and presentation also will be on the city's website. Monday the 23rd of May, the forum video from today will be available on the website. Please give us your feedback. We really want to hear from you. If you didn't have the opportunity today to say anything or ask a question, we would love for you to give us the feedback. So tell us your thoughts about the review and your preference for the future. There's the email address, reviewfeedback@canning.wa.gov.au, via mail, Lockbag 80, Welshpool WA 6986, or in person here at the city, and there's staff here. We've got our project team that are more than happy to come out and have a chat to you. And it all needs to be in, please, by 4 p.m. on the 17th of June, because we do have to make some recommendations to our council in July. Just to let you know that we're going to take our council, they've already seen some of our care facilities, but we're proposing to take them on a tour of all the care facilities and all the services, aged care services and disability services that the city actually runs, so they'll have a really good look at everything the city has provided in the past. For more information or questions, please contact me anytime, or Lisa Bradley, our Manager of Comms and Marketing. And that's it. Thank you very much for being here.